Now let's talk a little bit about the feminine presence in the Great Trinity. In ancient Kemet, there were many trinities, but the most popular one that we're all familiar with is the one of Ast, Asar, and Heru. Now we know the story of Ast, Asar, and Heru. Ast supported her divine king by trying to find all of the pieces of his body that had been dispersed by his wicked brother Set. Okay, now I didn't say evil, I said wicked, and we'll get into that shortly. But she brought those pieces together. Unfortunately, she was only able to find 13 and had to recreate the 14th piece on her own to generate the seed that she needed to give birth to Heru. And you'll see the three of them standing together in the center picture. The word Nter is the word for the creator. Within it, you have the letter T and R. T being the feminine principle, R being the masculine principle. So within the Kemetic faith, the creator was both man and woman. And within that, there were different faculties, meaning that there were several different names that the creator had because each name represented a different principle. Not that there were many different gods. They weren't considered gods. They were considered faculties or principles of the divine being. They looked at everything as a balance. So you had to have balance, and without balance, what would you have? The complement, which is chaos. So in the spiritual belief system, you had Ma'at, which was the ultimate balance. But then you had Set, who was chaos and mischief. And now Set, through time, became Satan and various other religions. Our role in our lifetime is to deal with the challenge within us. We talked about the role of Haramanket and how we have to raise our higher consciousness to deal with our lower consciousness, and that without that balance, you'll never be a divine being. And that means not only do you have to deal with the lower aspects of making sure that you don't have too much chaos in your life, but you also can't be too self-righteous. We talked about Seshat, who is the female scribe. She is the complement to Tahuti, which is a scribe that many of us are familiar with. But we asked you, who does she look like that we've seen in the United States? When you look at her, is there any statue? There you go, exactly. Doesn't she remind you of the Statue of Liberty? Where do you think they got the concept from? What does the Statue of Liberty hold? A torch, and what else? And a book. What do you do with a book? You read a book, right? Somebody wrote the book. She's the master scribe. That's where they got the concept for the Statue of Liberty. Now, we talked about Ma'at. And I mentioned to you that every day you have the opportunity to make up for the day that passed. Ma'at had 42 confessions that you had to state every day as a Kemite. You would wake up in the morning and you would quote all 42. You'd start off by saying, I will not do wrong. I will not rob. I will not slay men. I will not speak lies. And at the end of the day, you had to be held accountable. So then you would have to go back through and say, I have not done wrong. I have not afflicted any pain. I have not carried off food or spoken any lies. So who's responsible for your ultimate destination? You are. Okay. The belief is that no one else can save you. You must save yourself. And that every day you have that responsibility. And yes, we slip up sometimes. But you have every day you have the day to be reborn. And every day you have that opportunity to relive. Now, how many of you looked up at the ceiling when you went into the tombs yesterday? Did you notice this on the ceiling? Okay. Now, I don't see Athena here. Her daughter would appreciate this since her daughter's name is Heaven. The concept in the Kemetic faith is that the black woman is heaven. They use a black woman to define heaven itself. So you'll see Nut stretched out upon the sky. And in the image that you saw, there was a sun that she actually swallowed that went all the way through her body. So she would swallow the sun at night, and it would travel through her body, and she would give birth to it again the next day. And you saw all the stars on the ceiling. Those were the stars of her body. Underneath her, holding her up, is her father, Shu. Shu is the breath. Shu is the fire. Shu is the air that we all breathe. Exactly. And underneath Shu, you'll see Geb. That's her mate. He lies underneath her. And what does he represent? Exactly, the ground, the earth. That's Geb. So now we talked about the fire. We talked about the air. We talked about earth. So what's missing? The fourth element, water. Her mother is Tefnut, which is moisture. She's not represented in this image, and you won't see her represented in too many places, but they write about her very often. And even some of the queens chose to represent themselves as Tefnut because they wanted to recognize the water element within themselves. Now, in studying ancient Kemet, you'll see that women had many more rights than some of us even have today in the United States. They had legal rights where they can manage and dispose of their own private property, which included land, portable goods. They had their own servants, animals, and their own money. It's like having your own bank account. They were able to do that in ancient Egypt. They had marital rights where they can go into contracts for marriage, and they can even have a divorce. In some of our own religious beliefs right now, we cannot have divorces in these days and age. But they were able to have divorces at any time that they chose back in ancient Egypt. Lady Peseshet lived during the 4th dynasty and was credited as being the earliest known female physician in ancient Egypt. Her title was the Lady Overseer of Female Physicians. So her job was to actually look over all of the female physicians in ancient Kemet, and that they would come to her for guidance, and she would supervise their actions, and she would supervise their surgeries. Nebet during the 6th dynasty was called the vizier, a judge, and a magistrate. She was the grandmother of King Pepi I. So she was able to judge in court situations. Can you imagine a woman thousands of years ago being a judge, and now they're questioning whether we can have this Latino woman as a judge today? I mean, that's amazing. Why are we even questioning that? And all these women had the right to vote. We didn't get the right to vote till the 1920s. And we all mentioned before that in order for a man to become Nsabit, it had to go through the royal bloodline of the woman. So now let's talk about some of the female rulers that existed. Sobek Nefru was a female Nsabit as well. She's the 3rd woman who may have ruled as a king during the 12th dynasty, and she was the daughter of Amenemhat III. Queen Tuarset, or Tuarset, was the last known female Nsabit of Egypt, of local indigenous dynasty. Hatshepsut, I know we've spoken a lot about this great woman. She ruled from 1479 to 1458 BC and was the 5th ruler of the 18th dynasty. She was actually the favorite of her father, of the many children that her father had. She was the daughter of Thutmose I and her mom Ames, which were both of royal lineage. She ruled for about 21 years. Now, both of her brothers died. After her father passed on, the only person that was fit to rule was her nephew, but he was too young. So she served as regent for a period of approximately 2 years until she realized, you know what, I can rule this land. And I can rule it as a woman, but you'll call me king. So she had all of the rights of the males in the area, but yet she was a very feminine woman. You'll see her in many lights where she took on the personification of Het Heru, the deity of love, beauty, and dance. So yes, she may have ruled like a man, but she was definitely a woman.